actually follow it through and go after it. And so I suppose that's one thing that I've done well. I've seen opportunity and I've just jumped, and I've sort of been courageous in diving into the deep end and learning stuff on as we build. And yeah, just really the vision that we started with wasn't the vision that we've, where the business has ended up today. And, we're in a really exciting phase of our growth. So it's been an amazing journey so far.
Well, you say the phase of your growth, and that's the next sort of starting talking point I wanted to get into. Pizza ovens, pizza adapters for your grill or your oven or whatever it may be, have been around forever, as I mentioned a second ago. But what you guys do, the innovation of the design, the development of the design has been absolutely, game changing, and they are all over the world now. And we're going to talk to Denny here in just a second. When enabled, in order to get it to where it is today, the market is talking to you louder than ever. I mean, it's always been about pits and smokers and maybe some sort of pizza oven adapter, for lack of a better word. But what you guys are doing, it is really, the market right now is just so hot. I mean, what do you attribute that to?
Yeah, it's really interesting, John. When I started the business years and years ago, 2011 was when the business started, but I built my first ever brick oven in my garden in 2009. And, pizza has always been a huge, a hugely popular food type with consumers all over the world, right? It's a universal food. Everybody loves it, but no one had really delved into making it accessible at home. And I built an oven in my garden in 2011, built a brick oven after making pizzas in our kitchen one evening. We sort of made dough and we cooked them in the conventional oven. And the process of making and participating together and bringing friends around a table and everybody opening their dough, topping their pizzas was the most incredible journey. But when we cooked them in the conventional oven, they were just a bit soggy. They weren't overly crispy. They were a bit rubbish. And
trust me, I know.
And it was that moment, I suppose. It wasn't really the output of the food. It was the community aspect of bringing people together. I'd never really experienced anything like that before. When we'd historically in the UK cooked on grills, it would typically be like one person, like dad in the corner of the garden flipping burgers and turning sausages and everybody waiting to get fed. And there was just something so magical about opening dough together, topping it together. You could personalize your pizza. And then they cooked, like when we started building a brick oven, we built this thing and you cook next to a fire. They cooked in a minute. And it was just the most mesmerizing experience seeing a dough ball go to a pizza base, topped into an oven, out of an oven in 60 seconds. And it was, just the most incredible pizza we'd ever eaten. And so I think that was the sort of light bulb moment to me where there was something really, really special there. Mm-hmm. And I think, at Gozney, what we tried to do, and Denny can talk on this a little bit more as well, but I don't really view the business as a hardware brand, a pizza oven brand, even a product brand that produces food. I see it as a sort of community building brand. I see us building rituals with families, and our ovens in gardens bring people together, and iPhones get put down for a few hours and everybody enjoys creating. And I think that's the magic that we've really harnessed at Gozney, and we've been able to tell those stories, which has really helped the brand grow.
That's really well put. And Denny Brucce is joining us as well. And I want to thank you as well, Denny, for joining us with the time change. I believe you're also in the UK right now. But if you're not, let me know. But what Tom is describing here is accessibility. And that's one of my catchwords for what makes this crazy industry that we all love magical, as he put it. I've been to a quote Gozney party, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, where you have 6, 7, 8 different people with the pizzas, and they personalize it, and it cooks real quick, so everybody's still eating together. But they have their own pizza. The accessibility of Gozney, Denny, I wanted you to speak on that, because that seems to be, as he just described, what kind of separates it and brings it into people's homes.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I'll go back a little bit. What we saw during COVID, everybody goes, hey, during COVID, people couldn't go to restaurants. So they began eating more at home, and all of a sudden people wanted to cook cook different foods outside. And maybe that's why the industry as a whole kind of elevated. I'd go, it's actually beyond that. I think it was like a cultural moment and movement. People didn't just start eating more at home. People moved out of the cities. People moved to places that they wanted to live. They moved to their farm in upstate New York instead of, living in Manhattan. They moved to the beach so they could go take walks on the ocean. And food just became part of that movement of people wanting to live where they enjoy the most. And for a lot of us, we enjoy being outdoors more than we enjoy being in our houses. And, to take something like something you have to do every single day, like feed your kids, and all of a sudden make it fun instead of standing in your kitchen and making macaroni and cheese out of a box. If all of a sudden I can go in my backyard, maybe crack open a beer and have a fun time where I'm stretching dough with my children and teaching them how to top a pizza and how to launch a pizza. All of a sudden now it takes a mundane task, puts it outdoors, which where I'd rather be, and makes it an enjoyable experience. So I really think it's about people just wanting to get outdoors and do something that they enjoy, as opposed to just making it a mundane task.
I'll tell you what, and Tom, it really, he said a mouthful there, and I think it's all accurate. But people, enjoying being outside, and I can't tell you, when I go into these barbecue shops and stores like Texas Star Grill Shop, which of course is my favorite, griddles and Gozney pizza ovens have just begun to be something, otherworldly. And so I think people want to take their whole kitchen outside, Tom. I mean, I think they want to take the whole thing, even not just because of the camaraderie and as Denny pointed out, we want to sort of become more remote. People are working remote, but it's also, let's take our whole kitchen outside and let's live that life. Griddles are off the charts right now. I know Gozney ovens are off the charts right now. Would you agree with that? Why is that? I know COVID might be a big factor, and I think it was, but why is that otherwise?
Is that for me, John, or Denny?
Yes, Tom. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's really it's interesting. Griddles have been that. I would say they're not necessarily as popular in the UK right now. We're behind the US, but for me, spending my time in the US, there's something magical about as Denny said, just cooking outdoors generally is great, and then getting that sort of like diversity of cooking types through being able to make smash burgers and different things like that on griddles is just super fun and accessible, right? You can replicate your best burger joint in the garden. Similarly with Gozney, you can make pizza that you would only be able to get in Naples a few years ago. We sort of brought that professional grade element to our consumer products and made it easy for adventurous home cooks to be able to make Naples style pizza in their garden. So I think there's a leveling up, as Denny said, when everyone moved out the cities in COVID, and sourdough baking was huge, wasn't it, throughout COVID? People had a lot of time on their hands. They wanted to craft stuff. And I think there's this mixture of craftsmanship, enjoying getting together, enjoying being outdoors, as Denny said. And so I think people just love exploring different food types, and doing that in the garden is just such a lovely process.
And Denny, just to dovetail off of that, I think people like to have the personalization of some. We had the CEO from Dan Gertzikoff from Big Green Egg on last week, and he is just adamant about making sure that they don't go into the big box stores. Well, they don't go at all, but a lot of people do, but very little, because they want their questions answered. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a store and people, their first word when they see a Gozney is "wow." They didn't know, first of all, it could cook that fast, that it could be that good, and that it can happen so fast. So he said accessibility, but I think it's also, Denny, I think it's also the fact that there's a relationship you build with these things. I mean, people have relationships with a Gozney oven. I'm not trying to blow smoke at you guys, but they do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that comes down to the community that we're building out. Like Tom lives for this. Not only is his name on the product, it's what he does inside and out. It's truly who he is, and that breeds like a different kind of entry point into the brand. And the people that come to work for us feed off of his energy, and they go, "Gosh, he surrounds." Who he is as a person, his family, around being together and creating moments, and it just happens so to be in his backyard, and it happens to be making pizza right now. And when that's kind of the cornerstone of who you are, it just attracts others. And our brand's been able to work with some of the best, like Matty Matheson. Matty Matheson is this Canadian restaurant entrepreneur that has been on a phenomenal run. He's a character on The Bear. If you're familiar with this, like.
No, I'm very familiar. I'm an addict. I knew exactly who you were talking about. Big dude, hell of a cook. He's been all over.
Amazing human being, but like, you know, we're a small brand and we normally wouldn't have access to somebody like that. Tom and Maddie met and they just hit it off. When people live for, you know, cooking food together and creating these experiences, it just attracts other like-minded people together. And I think that that's probably the difference between building a brand and creating a product. And I'd say, you know, our job 20 years ago, maybe the business was all about, like, grilling was essentially hamburgers and hot dogs.
Yeah.
You know,
Dad cooking steaks.
Back deck. Yeah. And maybe like when you got lucky, you know, special holiday, Dad cooked a steak. And, you know, in the South, 20 something years ago, people began building offset smokers and putting those on their back deck. But, you know, some of those offset smokers were hard to use. And so you had like this small movement of people that would go to competitions and stuff like that. And they would share recipes, they'd share tips and tricks. And all of a sudden that began to grow. And then as social media came out, all of a sudden you had these companies that were able to take stuff that was really only reserved for people showing up at a competition on a weekend and literally sleeping overnight, cooking a brisket for 12 to 14 hours. And all of a sudden these companies started shining a light on these tips and tricks, giving people a platform to share how they're doing it, how they're creating something, you know, that was only reserved for a restaurant up until then. And that created scale and that created a movement. And that's why, like, at Gozney, we're creating a brand here and trying to educate people. You know, again, 20 years ago, it was hamburgers, hot dogs. Then all of a sudden it was brisket and pulled pork. And all of a sudden we can add pizza to that as well. And to tie it all together with your question on griddles, like, to me, griddle meant one thing. He went to Smashburger. I went to breakfast, right? Like, I normally took kind of dinner outside, maybe an occasional lunch, but breakfast now, all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I can breakfast outdoors now. Like, it was just another opportunity for me to add a third or a fourth cooking device on my back deck. And again, move a meal that every Saturday and Sunday, I cook full breakfast for my kids. Now I can move that outdoors as well instead of standing in my kitchen.
You know, and Tom, he's mentioning what he's talking about is really like this podcast, ambassadors that you have. I can't tell you how many people that I've had on this podcast that they'll tell you everything. They'll tell you details of how they do this pork shoulder and how they do this ribs and then these chicken. And what an incredible community that you guys have truly, I shouldn't say taken advantage of, but truly are a part of, that really distributes the greatness and the uniqueness of a Gozney pizza oven. I wanted to ask you about that, the ambassadorships, the shows that like the chefs that he just talked about, Matheson. You know, that's unique to the barbecue industry. A lot of people like to keep secrets. There's not as many in this industry. I wanted to ask you, Tom, about that. Like, how much has that done for the Gozney brand?
Yeah, it's been huge, John. I think years ago it started very organically. You know, in 2016 we launched a little product called Rockbox, which was our sort of first, I would say, like needle moving product for the brand. We became a global brand with the launch of that product. You know, 50% of our sales came from the US, 20% of our sales came from Australia, and the rest was the UK at the time. And so that was a transformational moment for the business. And I suppose launching something that was so innovative and disruptive to a category, you know, before Rockbox was invented, you had to sort of buy a big stone oven or a brick oven or a prefab thing, but you had to build a base, get builders in, and do all those things. So the accessibility piece was something that Rockbox really solved. And I suppose when we were on that journey of developing it, we had key criteria that it had to cook like a professional grade oven, like a Neapolitan oven in a restaurant. And so we really, really wanted to share sort of immense pleasure of producing pizzas that had just such different quality to what you would be used to at home. And I suppose doing that and innovating a product that was essentially driving a new category just attracted people. It was just, it was like bees around a honeypot, I suppose. And so naturally through social, I just started networking and reaching out to people and asking people if they'd like to try the ovens and things like that. And it was just quite organic. Matty found the Gozney brand through a friend of a friend, and reached out and asked if he could have an oven, and we sent him an oven, and he just absolutely loved it. He just said it completely transformed the way that he cooked with his kids, and it was just this new adventure for him to go in. And so I actually think, sorry, it's a long-winded way of getting to the
no, I love it
to answer your question, but there was just this organic flow of just inbound people loving the brand, loving the products, really just a high level of intrigue around what the products did and how they worked. And so, it came quite freely to us to build really meaningful relationships with incredible people that were doing amazing things in the culinary space. And, I've essentially, it's so funny, like Denny talks earlier about how, I feel like I'm super, super fortunate in life because I've built a business around, essentially what was a hobby, cooking and entertaining friends and feeding people. It was the joy of building community and feeding people and bringing people together was what I loved the most. And our products facilitate that. And so I feel like I'm living, work's not work for me, which is great.
Yeah.
Work is super enjoyable. And then, so because of that like innate passion around building our infrastructure around culinary, you just build really, really meaningful relationships through social with people that have the same passions. And so lots of people like Matty that have been involved in our journey, and there are so many to mention, but they were just all very organic culinary friendships that developed into, and we were a tiny, tiny brand in 2016. We were Diddy, and we didn't really have any money to pay anyone, and we couldn't really do influencer marketing or anything like that. It was, we could give the odd product out here or there to people, and we did, and we just built this community of people that loved what we were doing and loved how we were innovating.
Can I build on that just a tiny bit? I'm going to share a little bit of Tom's story that maybe Tom can't share. Tom had an interesting point where this brand was truly built out of a need that Tom had from a challenge he had. Tom faced addiction early in his life, and he was able to go through a rehabilitation process and became sober. And part of his sobriety process was kind of re-engaging with his friends and family that he used to engage with in a different form, and bringing people over, inviting them to the backyard and cooking for them, like he said, became his hobby. What we've seen is that single story has resonated with a ton of people, and it's created this really unique and authentic bond that, like, a lot of people come through a door that to your point, maybe we wouldn't have connected with, that just resonate with Tom's story and go, hey, the restaurant space can be a tough space. You go to work at 4:00 in the afternoon. Sometimes you get off at midnight, 1 a.m. You want to unwind. Maybe you go out for a couple of cocktails afterwards. And it can be a tough environment. And a lot of professional chefs and professional wait staff go through a challenging period, and maybe they ultimately seek sobriety. And all of a sudden they see Tom that built this brand based on this need. And they've just come to him and said, I want to be a part of this. And today, some people have actually built businesses off of Tom's idea and Tom's notion, and said, look, I want to build a pizza business. I love what you did. And today we call them pizzapreneurs, where people that kind of went through a similar story with him, maybe they were afraid to go apply for a first job out of rehab or something along those lines. And instead they open a pizza truck, or they show up on a Saturday and Sunday at a farmer's market. They put 2 rock boxes out there, and all of a sudden they're selling pizza for $8 and making a living doing it. And that authenticity that Tom brings it's opened the door to unbelievable people. And I don't want to share other people's stories of challenge, but man, we work with some people that a small brand like us just wouldn't have the money to work with these people.
Sure.
That, just connect with Tom on a different level.
You know, Tom, I was going to bring that up today, but I'm glad Denny did, because I was talking with Sunny Lynn, who's been on all the cooking shows and Chopped and all that stuff, and she always says cooking cures. And your story, how did this business and cooking cure?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and yeah, I think I went into rehabilitation when I was young. I just turned 21 when I decided to sort of wave a white flag to my mum and say I'm ready. Poor mum was sort of in the ranks, probably waiting for about 5 years to me retire from the debaucherous life that I was living. That when I was a teenager, I thought I was carefree, fun, and like all the other kids, but my little close circle of friends were using hard drugs and drinking hard liquor constantly. And so I sort of grew to realize as I grew up that it wasn't actually that normal, but it was just a little clique that I was in. And I suppose I got to the age of about 18, John, where my drinking, my using, my drug taking was getting me into trouble, taking me to dark places. And I was really ready to stop, and I tried to stop, and that's when everything got progressively worse for me.
Yes.
So as soon as I tried to stop taking drugs and stop drinking obsessive amounts of alcohol, it escalated, and I guess that powerlessness over my addiction was brought to the surface. And so it probably took me a couple of years of fighting that, trying to quit, relapsing, all of those things. I mean, really not getting much time sober, maybe a day or two, and then thinking I could have one beer again, and one beer would lead to a month-long bender, and it was just this cycle that my chemistry and my makeup just doesn't mix with alcohol. I'm just a lunatic when I drink, and it leads
a lot
to
of
all
people
sorts
are
of
like
stuff.
that. Yeah,
and I got to a point where I suppose I led quite a fast lifestyle as a younger kid, and there was just this moment where I just sat back and I just sort of thought, like, I just don't want this to be my life. I've got so much more potential and I've got so much more to give. Not only that for my own personal well-being, but the damage it was doing to the loved ones around me. It was just really hard to witness. And you sort of drown out the shame and the guilt and the fear with just drinking more. But there's this repetitive cycle that just takes you into darker and darker places. So I sort of waved a white flag to my mum when I was just turned 21. Within a week, I was on a flight to South Africa, and I spent just shy of a year in a rehabilitation center in South Africa, which absolutely petrified me. I was scared, so scared to leave the life that I knew, the safety blankets of alcohol and drugs. But it's just something that had to be done, and so it was a bold move as a young kid to go out. But I suppose, doing the year in rehabilitation felt hard when I was there, but that was actually like the easy bit. Coming back to the UK and being immersed in UK culture, and all my friends, my wider circle of friends were just warming up to partying, and going out. We were only 21, and so I felt like I'd had to mature 10 years early, get to 30, and like figure out how I could structure my life to be different. And I suppose, in answer to your question, I was really, really, really lost when I came out of treatment. I didn't know who I was, how to act. My entire persona for my younger years had been Tom, the mess head that would drink the most and take drugs and the life of the party and the crazy guy and all of that stuff. And that just wasn't who I was anymore. I got sober, and it wasn't who I wanted to be. It wasn't who I'd become, but I didn't really know who I was. And so it's a really interesting point of reflection for me in the early stages of my recovery, when I was maybe 6 months out, where I was just like, I'm not gonna achieve success in my recovery unless I find a way to reintegrate myself back into society, but safely. And I found cooking and the craft and the rituals of making, the shopping, the planning of food, the feeding people. There were so many things in there that just ticked so many boxes for me. I felt it was almost like meditative, going out and buying all the food and preparing it and getting, and sort of crafting my own recipes and doing things like that. And then a handful of close friends would come around, you'd feed them, everyone get full bellies, and it would be a great evening. And I suppose that was where I really found a sort of shining light for myself to find community and safety in socializing. Because I'm such a social person, but I was just so fearful of going into environments that were surrounded by alcohol and all the other stuff. So that led us, we went on this journey to, we were big fans in the early days of Man versus Food, that show with Adam Richman. And so we used to make these crazy big burgers and just stupid amounts of food. And we would all like feed heavily and big curries and all sorts of stuff. And then one evening we just, as I said to you at the beginning of the show, I made a batch of dough and I had 4 friends over and we all rolled out our own dough ball and cooked it in the oven. And there was a few things that hit with that. It was this making together. Before that, I was making all the food and feeding everyone. And then when we had our dough, it was like everyone was personalizing their own pizzas, making their own dough. And it just captured me. It mesmerized me. And it was literally, I said to my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, Laura, we cooked pizzas that evening. And I said, I need to buy a pizza oven for the garden. That was such a fun process. Mm-hmm. And so I looked online and there was just nobody selling pizza ovens in the UK. You could buy big sort of £3,000 Italian imports and you had to get a builder out and build a base and insulate it. And we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. We were so broke at the time. I was laboring on building sites and Laura was trying to make it out of university doing, early stage works, basically volunteering for agencies to try and get work and things like that. So we were broke. But I built the pizza oven in the garden and it was an absolute monstrosity. It was really, really ugly. And it was hideous. But the most amazing thing happened to my life. It was like, I lit that thing, put a load of wood in it, built a roaring fire. The thing got really, really hot. And then we saw pizzas cook in 60 seconds. And it was like, wow. There was so many aspects of cooking with fire that just completely mesmerized me. My mum said something to me really early on, which has always stayed with me, which is, you never feel alone if you're with a fire. It's almost like something spiritual. And I found that when I was dealing with high levels of vulnerability in the early stage of my recovery, and I was fighting demons and life was just really flipping hard, I would light a fire in the garden. I would cook a bit of food, but I would continue to put wood on the fire for 3 hours after I'd finished cooking and just watch it and move the coals around the oven and learn about the oven and put my hand in. And so there was just this fascination that I had with cooking next to fire. But also because I didn't want to be socially isolated, I was inviting friends over, but I didn't want to tell them that they couldn't bring alcohol because I just didn't want the social isolation. So I was sort of internally battling all of these vulnerabilities. And then the most poignant thing happened in my life, which was we built the oven in the garden. I started making dough balls. We continued inviting our friends round. And maybe after a week or 2 of inviting friends round, everybody stopped bringing beers and started bringing toppings. And it was just this like organic intervention that the oven had delivered for my life where, all of a sudden, all the vulnerabilities of having alcohol in my social dynamic were gone. Everyone was just bringing Scotch bonnet peppers and all sorts of things. And we were making chili pizzas and burning each other's faces off. And it just brought this like joy and freedom and then gave me purpose. And I suppose that was really the big unlock that food gave me. It gave me this sense of purpose and community. And it was just, I love building and crafting and designing. And that's just what you do with food. You craft and you design and you make. And it was just, it's like, sorry, I'll shut up in a second. But
no, I love it. This is fantastic.
I often relate it to, like when you go on vacation, some people can't go on vacation and sit on a sun lounger. They just get itchy feet. They pace around the pool. They can't do it. And the only holidays that I can really go on where I truly have a stress-free existence, I go skiing or I go fishing, right? And those things, the world leaves my head. I focus on the tip of a rod or going down a hill as fast as I can. And cooking gave me the same thing. It was just complete detachment from reality. It was freedom. And it also pulled community into the garden and all my friends and loved ones. So, food gave me so much. And I suppose, then deciding to build a business around it, the sort of underlying values that we have in the brand are just so poignant to my journey of bringing people together and allowing people to escape through the rituals of making. So, that's the poignancy that lives in me from a passionate perspective today, which is why I will be passionate about our business until the day I die, because it's just saved my life, And so that's what food has given me.
It's first of all, thank you. That was an incredible, really testimony, and I'm sure our listeners are going to appreciate that. And I actually wrote that down because that's something that I could live by. You never feel alone when you're with a fire. I actually wrote that down, and you see that big fish behind me. I'm a sicko when it comes to two things: cooking and fishing. So we're kind of brothers. We're kind of brothers from another mother here. Now, Denny. Here's the thing: he built this incredible product, and maybe we'll get to the actual product itself here and how you built it in a second. But I have a question for you, Denny, because it is taking over the world. It is beyond anything I'm sure even Tom could have expected. But anytime you do something like that, here come all the copycats. Here come all the copycats. Well, look at what they're doing over at Gozney. Staying ahead is something that you guys have been able to do, and I'm sure will continue to do. But that's not an easy task. How do you do that? How do you stay innovative and on top of it?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's funny. I was with a key retailer yesterday who asked me the same question. He wants to preserve the runway for the growth of the business. He was nervous about some of the copycats you see showing up on online marketplaces and stuff like that. First off, I'd start off with our product is unique. It's a very, very hard product to produce. We spent a lot of time with our manufacturers in order to get our product right. And essentially, it's a 3-layer construction. We have an internal core with a very, very thick stone in the bottom. Then wrapped around that 360 degrees is a layer of insulation. And then you have the shell or the dome around the outside that sits on a docking platform. Just that style of construction is very, very hard for people to knock off. It's very expensive tooling and a very expensive process in order to replicate that, as opposed to some of our competitors in the pizza space kind of stamp out parts. Maybe they bend them a little bit, maybe they rivet the edges of them. It's not insulated, but it looks like a pizza oven, and you can turn it up and it'll create a pizza. I'd say the healthy tension Tom and I always go back and forth with is Tom definitely has a threshold of pizza experience that if it has the Gozney name on it, it needs to maintain. One of our retailers has asked us for an opening price point product because he is seeing other people buy products that are cheaper than ours. And we've been challenged to hit a minimum threshold. And my piece is I have to find a way to hit a price point, and Tom has to find a way to make that product live up to his expectations at that price point. And that expectation is simple. This is a product that is going to stand the test of time. It's a product that will heat up to the proper temperature, but not only heat up, it'll saturate that stone long enough to create pizza after pizza. Well, what we'll see in a non-insulated, non-commercial oven is you'll launch that pizza in there, and what they do is they squash the oven so tight that burner sits inches above your cheese, and it gets launched, your dough's cold, your cheese is cold, and that cheese naturally wants to heat up really, really quick, and at times will begin to burn before your crust is done. And that's just because, some of these new companies that just come into the space that are just looking to knock off a brand, they don't have 20 years of experience like Tom does, creating commercial grade ovens that are designed to bang out 100, 200 pizzas in a day. Yeah. It's the level of product that Tom's creating, whether it's a $500 product for your back deck, or it's a $5,000 commercial grade product for some of the best restaurants in the UK. They all have to live up to that threshold. So I think we do a good job of distancing ourselves from our competitors, simply because it's a better product and it's a harder product to replicate.
It comes down to that. It comes down to that. And Tom, I'm sitting here thinking, I know about you, I've read about you, and you've shared so much here today. But I keep coming back to the same question after Denny said that. How? I don't. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think you have 7 or 8 engineering degrees. I maybe you do. But how did the concept of the value of the quality, I should say, of the product, how did you come with that? I know there was a lot of trial and error, but how did you come to that?
Yeah. So I had my sort of university degree in the first 5 years of running the business. We launched a a small sort of, for want of a better framing, like a little concrete igloo, which was the first ever product that we made, which was a 2-foot internal diameter, a little product called the Primo. And that was my vision, to release an affordable product into the UK market when there was nothing accessible here. So I made a 2-part fiberglass mold. I spent about 6 months researching how pizza ovens were made. I researched refractory materials, which is essentially like a high heat concrete that they used, with sort of alumina and clay-based silica. I researched all of that stuff. I got a £5,000 loan from my mum, had a fiberglass mold made, and built a website, and that was the beginning of my journey. But as we advanced into the journey, we had an opportunity to sell a larger commercial oven into a really well-respected hotel chain in the UK. And we didn't have a commercial oven at the time, but I sort of said to the managing director in there, I said, yeah, we can do it. We can do it.
Of course we can.
I need 50% payment up front for the oven, and I'll run off and go and design the molds. And I didn't say I was going to run off and design the molds, but I did. I took a 50% payment, and then we started on a journey to make larger segmented refractory commercial ovens. And one thing that I saw in the UK market quite quickly was there was only ovens. You could only really buy ovens from Italy at that time that were fully assembled. People had to take their shop fronts down to get them into their restaurants, and they had to use cranes to get them in. And I was just like, geez, this is just such a problem for restaurant owners, especially in London, where the majority of shop fronts are listed buildings. You have to number every single brick that comes out, put them back. You have to have the heritage officer watch you do it. It costs about £20,000-30,000 to take a shop front down and rebuild it. And so on top of the cost of the oven, people were spending £40,000-50,000. And it was just like, that baffled me. It was bizarre to me. So I then went on a journey to solve the issues in the commercial oven space we patented the sort of first truly modular fast assembly installation commercial oven, where it was built in segments. We could take it through any doorway, and we could assemble it in one day and have a full commercial oven built without the customer having to do it. All they needed to do was open the door and let us in. And so we did that. And the very nature of the innovation of that fast assembly kit system, we just then got flooded with demand from these fast growth independent chains that were looking to scale up to 30, 40, 50 stores. So these are big sort of 7-8 foot commercial ovens. We were also the first people, because of my, what's really interesting, sort of idiosyncrasies about a British guy making an Italian oven in England and then going against Italian distributors to sell to Italian chefs that were in the UK. They didn't give a shit to buy an oven from a British guy that has no experience, right? So I knew really early on, if I wanted to win, we had to make our ovens work brilliantly. They had to be the best ovens on the market. So I went to town. We spent maybe a year developing the most efficient material composition and the composition of all the insulation and how the ovens were built to make them stay hot, cook pizzas perfectly every single time. And then very early on in our journey, there was a hyper successful independent pizzeria called Franco Manca that was in Brixton Market, and they had like a 5-seater restaurant, but on the weekends, I think early on they opened 3 days a week, and they would have a sort of 300-yard queue down Brixton High Street waiting for their pizzas, and they would churn 2,000 pizzas out a night. And it was one oven, 5 seats, and these guys were on fire. And then there was this Neapolitan pizza trend that hit the UK, and we developed our commercial oven right at that moment and that time, where Franco Manca drove this change in this new obsession with Neapolitan pizza in the commercial space. And then every restaurateur, it was also, in quite close proximity to the global recession of 2008. And, lots of fine dining restaurants were struggling, and actually restaurants and street food places with simple ingredients. Franco Manca sold a £6 pizza. It was £6 for this incredible work of art. And it was just beautiful. And it had the whole of the UK hooked. And Franco Manca came to us, and they had this incredible opportunity to scale up to more stores, but they just couldn't put the ovens in the stores that they had access to, and we had the solution for that. So we started supplying Franco Manca. And I tell you what, that was the biggest education for me, because every single one of their chefs spoke a little English. They were all from Naples. They all wanted ovens from Naples. They didn't want a British oven. So the chefs just didn't want to use our products, you know, for the first 2 years of us trying to work with those guys. And so we went on this incredible journey of learning about the engineering through the sort of like 5th generation Neapolitan pizza chefs that were literally trying to help us get to a place where it could cook their style of pizza perfectly.
Yeah.
And so we were changing material compositions, dome heights. But on that journey, myself and my head engineer, Patrick, who was our 3rd employee in the business, my wife was the 2nd employee, we immersed ourselves with Franco Manca for 2 years, learning about every single tiny element of what it takes to cook a brilliant Neapolitan pizza. And then we developed this larger range of ovens that went, and we supplied mod pizza that scaled up in the US. They came to the UK. We supplied them with a very different style of oven. But in answer to your question, I really sort of cut my teeth on learning about the engineering of these products through firsthand experience working with the world's greatest chefs in pizza.
And then scaled it down. And there you go. That's why Gozney is Gozney right there.
That was the vision, man. And it was like, even if you look at the dome today, it's like a scaled down version of what a big commercial oven looks like. It's got a sort of black brow on the top of it. It looks kind of aggressive, but it's rooted in the heritage of Naples. And it's sort of friendly but aggressive, but rooted in its history. And that's what I wanted to bring. I wanted to bring that Neapolitan experience to every garden in the world. And so we are uncompromising with how we develop our products from a performance basis. And, you know, I would say that's one of the key things that we are unapologetic about is, you know, we develop products that are just world-class products and work brilliantly. So I love the notion that we take a sort of ancient method of cooking that's done incredibly by professionals, and then we make that easy for home cooks, but never compromising on the performance. And so that's the sort of package that you get with one of our ovens today.
That's everything about this has been inspiring, and I know our listeners are going to love it. And they're probably going to run out and buy Gozney. I know I want to get one now. I've used them. I've cooked on them. I'm about to go get one. Maybe right after we record this. Anyway, and shout out to Mom. By the way, Mom helped you personally, and then Mom gave you 5,000 pounds. I mean, we got to give her a little shout out. What's her name?
Linda. She's the best. She's been my biggest cheerleader since day one. Even when I was going through all my troubles, you know, she'd always said to me, you can just achieve anything you set your mind to. And I just like that single notion of her being a parent when I was going through my troubles, to say you can just achieve anything you want. That was what gave me the courage to go out and build a business and to go hard and scale it. So mum gets the credit today, man.
Look, I know I'm probably going a little long and it's getting late there, but I have 2 more things, one for you, Denny, one for Tom. Clearly, anybody who listens to this, Denny, understands the passion, understands the quality, understands the story, and the inspiration and the quality. So like these ovens are just next level. But what is next for you? You've been on, I know you've been with Tom's since 2021, I believe. CEO, maybe a year? Correct me if I'm wrong on those dates, but where does Gozney go from here?
Yeah, interesting. So I've been in. I was a board member, and I was fortunate to be able to invest in the business 5, 6, 7 years ago. I've been acting CEO for a little over 2 years now, and I say that with humbleness that Tom always says to me, he handed over his first child to me to take care of it. And so I humbly accepted that. But first off, we're hardly done. We are scratching the surface of being a pizza company. But in total honesty, we see ourselves as a much bigger brand. We invest in not only just building great product, but brand and building community. And I think inherent in that, when you have enough friends and family that want to be a part of this movement we're creating, it's upon us to develop new products for them. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too early.
Oh no, I don't want any proprietary secrets, but just sort of in general where we're going.
We're working on new products. We're not just going to be known for a pizza oven company. Tom's got a couple tricks up his sleeve. We're going to bring something to market that doesn't exist today at scale. But, Tom has this notion of ancient cooking methods, package that are easy for the home chef to use. and we're going to keep going down that road. And it's probably going to take us a little bit, but I've cooked on Tom's prototype, and it's phenomenal. I can tell you that.
All right, now we're all curious. All right, Tom, last one, and this is for you. One thing I do with all the chefs and pit masters and leaders in the industry on this podcast, it's just personal. I always have this for people at the end of our podcast, and that is so many people in this industry are involved in whether it's charitable organizations or foundations or passion projects. So I wanted to kind of just toss it to you to maybe talk about some of the things that Gozney does in the community, in the industry, et cetera.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think back in, when was it? 2 years ago. 2 years ago now. I hit my 15-year sobriety birthday, and I'd really been quite, I don't know, I don't think apprehensive is the word. I'm like proud of my story. I'm proud of my journey, and I'm proud of the years that I've had before recovery, because, without it sounding overly cliche, it's helped structured me as a human to take the next phase of my life. But I never really shared my story, John, about addiction or drugs or alcohol publicly. Like, I'm very open with all my close friends and my family, but in 2 years ago, on my 15-year sobriety birthday, we decided that we would share my story. And the reason I didn't want to was there was a couple of reasons. I guess I felt like I wanted the business to become a brand, and I didn't want to use my story. It's a very, very personal story to me. I didn't want to use it as a PR stunt to try and get growth for the business or awareness. And like, that was just really important for me. And I felt like I needed to get the company to a certain size and a certain scale before I was comfortable sharing that, just on the basis that we were able to stand on our own 2 feet and it didn't feel like a PR stunt. And so we got there, a couple of years ago, and it felt like the right time. And so we actually, Denny and I spoke about it at length, and we did a limited edition version of a rock box, which was a fully black version of a rock box, which is called a Tom Gozney Signature Edition. It had actually my sobriety date on the front of the rock box, laser etched onto the front of the rock box. And we launched that in conjunction with my story on YouTube about my addiction and moving into a life of sobriety. And actually we sold that product and donated a large amount of money to 3 charities supporting people with mental health, but predominantly around mental health challenges with addiction and drug addiction. And that was just an incredibly special moment for me, being able to invest 6 figures back into a place where lots and lots of people are struggling and deliver that support. And so that was a really big moment. And we've continued to do charitable work towards addiction charities, and we've actually got some really, really exciting initiatives that Denny and I are toing and froing back and forth at the moment with regards to driving more support into those areas. And whilst continuing to give to charities, but also looking to build out initiatives within Gozney where we can support people that are coming from a life of addiction into recovery.
Absolutely fantastic. You two guys, again, appreciate your time. I know you're pulled in many different directions, and I know you probably just want to have dinner and go to bed over there. But I really appreciate your time. We will follow up with you guys at some point down the future, and certainly our listeners, I know, appreciate it. So thank you both very much.
Hey, we appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Thank you so much, John.
All right, coming up,
Yeah,
we've got the smoking hot tip of the week, actually from Texas Star Grill Shop with Juan Castro, and that's coming up right now. All right.